walking through how I built the net worth section, which will be very similar to what you guys are building. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to make a video for each page. If we go into here, I've got each section. I'll just close some of this other stuff here. So when I go into net worth, if I click on this, I've got my components, my data, folders, and then the main file. So I'm going to go through each of the files and do a video for each one so that if you come to one of the files and you're looking at my code and wondering what I was thinking or why I did what I did, then you could just rewatch this video and hopefully I'll be able to explain what was going on. So we're going to start with the base file, which is the networth.js. So this is, if you come to here, it's kind of the wrapper that's holding everything together. So the entire, everything that we see all throughout this whole thing is held within the networth.js file. So in order to do that, I decided that first of all, I wanted to, as I've talked about before, I wanted to keep this as one component that's the same, but just gets passed different information. So as we go through, it'll have different information that it's showing, but it's still the same component. Similarly, I wanted to do that for this top display component. And so what I did is I began with a formula. So first, maybe I'll just walk through. I imported React. I've got use state. I'm using state in this one because I'm using count and set count, which is controlling the flow back and forth here. And then I have the display. So the display and set display right here, they refer to over here if I want to flip between assets and liabilities. So that's controlled in the state of the overall networth.js file. So I imported that. I've got my styled components. I'm importing control panel here. So control panel is down a little lower, and it's the control panel that at the end I needed something that I could wrap these in. So I called it control panel, and then it had to, whoops, if I flip back and forth, the section or the wrapper of each of these display sections is control panel. Whereas over in here, these displays don't have a wrapper because it's taking up the entire space, so they don't have control panel. But we'll get to that a little later. So I've got my control panel. Then I've got connect, so that's connecting me to Redux so that I can pull in some important stuff. Then I've got my two charts, sunburst chart and projection chart. So these are stored up in the chart section. So if I go into Networth, I've got my projection chart, and then I've got my sunburst chart. And so for you guys, I don't worry too much about charts. You could put chart placeholders. One thing you could do is take a screenshot of like one of these charts and then put that in as a placeholder. If you store that in the assets, I've done that quite a bit before with images. I wonder if you can see them. There we go. So I kind of stored them. I stored different screenshots of charts just to take up space. That was before I knew how to do charts. So back to the net worth section here. So we've got our charts. I'm importing button light. I'm taking that from the button section. So that refers to these buttons here. They're coming in. Then the add form. So this is what I decided to call this section right here, the add form. I wasn't really sure the best thing to call it, but it's kind of a form because it collects a bunch of data. And so if I type in there, it takes all this. So this is the form, but this form is different than the edit form. If we go over to here, if I click on this time I'm editing it. I already have the data stored. Whereas here, I'm creating new data, or I'm putting new data in. So that's my add form. And the add form is being pulled in. Then I've got some data. This is my net worth wizard data right here. This is stored in data, and I stored it as an array. So what I did is I took all the information that I wanted to have be different for each of the different sections. So for instance, here I've got monthly payment, current balance, but if I go here, suddenly I've got amortization, interest rate, mortgage starting balance, and so I've got more information here than I do here, as well as these titles are a little bit different, and then these along the side are different. So I could have just built entirely new components for each one. but that would have just been way too much code. So the magic of React is that you can create a component and then map through data and have the component receive different props for each time it has that data. And so that's really what React is all about, which I'm sure you guys know, is creating that one component that then you map through. So it's all about the mapping and then changing it. So what I did is I created this data, which will then be mapped through. So each one, so I've got my cache assets. So if I go over to here in cache assets, so that's the title. Then I've got my the label. I've got a cache value. So this is called cache value. I decided that I wouldn't show an interest rate bar, so I don't really need this interest rate label, but it's there anyways. Then I've got my account type array, which is this array here that's showing along the side. So this is being passed down to the choose one section. So I'll go back to my net worth. So that's where I'm grabbing that data. Then I'm pulling in my header. My header represents, if I go over here, these details up here. So these back and forth flippers right there, this net worth thing. So this is all the header right along the top. And then if we go over here, I've got my welcome page. So this is just this page that starts at the beginning that will one day hold the video. So that's that section. Then I've got my item display box. So I wasn't really sure what to call this here that contains the different items. But if I add an item, then I can add. So in adding them, I just refer to each of these as an item because sometimes it's an asset, sometimes it's a liability, but I thought it'd be easier just to call it item. So this is my item display table that's also being pulled in. So now it's this function called net worth. It's not taking any props. I've decided before when I used to code, I would take all the props, like the main things that would be needed. I would take them in the top level file and then pass them all down. But now with Redux, I can access all the file or the information that I need. Each individual file could pull that if it needs it. So that's what I prefer to do now, just to keep it a little less clunky with passing down the props. So then what I did is I created a function. So you can see that my return statement is down here. This is the stuff that's being returned by the function. But before that, I've got a local function right here that I've built. And I called this render add form. So it's going through the array that I built over here. So this net worth wizard data array. And then for each one, so basically it's just a simple map. So it's mapping through, rendering out this information, and then going to the next one, rendering out this information. Then you can see that each of these has a count. So I've got a count 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I go into here, I start by taking the data. So it takes data, then it returns a map of that data. So I'm mapping over the data. I just call them each D. I kind of find that I prefer using D whenever I do a map. Everybody has their own different thing. It's because of in D3, the charting library, all mapping, everything is just referred to as D. So that's just what I've started doing. But I don't mind at all if you guys have a different version. You can also name these, but personally I just like to keep it short and call it D. So at first it's going to check, and it's going to say d.count, does this equal the count that we have up here? So in this case, the count and the set count, so this is our state, use state 0. So it's starting at 0. If I press this button, so when it starts here, if I press this, it just changed the count to 1. So suddenly d.count equals 1. So then if we go into here, I don't want to patronize you too much because you might know all this already, but it's saying that these counts match, so it's going to render this data. So then it's going to render out two things. So I decided to call or create a full add page because I had to keep these separate. So we've got an add page. Now the information for the add page should be down here. Here we go. So it's just an empty div that has the same properties as the overall page. So in my styled components, I did const add page equals a styled page. So when I do this, it just copies, so it's the exact same as page. But I suppose I could have just done page. I just called it a page. Oh no, wait, I don't think I could because it's being rendered within this. So anyways, I had thought it through at the time. I figured that was the best way to go. But if you find something else, that'd be cool. I'd love to see what you come up with. So then I've got the display wrapper. So because the display here is the full width of the screen, but later on, we see over here, the display is much shorter. It's kind of squished down so that we could fit more items in there. Then because of that, I needed to have a wrapper that would be different for each, depending where you were in the program. So I have the display wrapper, and then the display wrapper, the information for that is down here. So it's got a grid area of A. So for the page layout, I've used grid template areas, and I've got A, B, and C. So I basically created a line across the top called A, and I made A pretty skinny. So I used min-max here of 7 to 10 rems. So that's pretty skinny along the top. Then I've got B, which is in the middle. This is our middle section. And this is this section here, which is a little bit thicker. And then C, which is the thickest. So along the bottom, I've got my C row, which is this whole section down here. And so then this one is 28 rems to 40 rems, depending on the screen size. So up in here, I created display wrapper. This is going to take up all of A. So over here, A is being taken up by the display wrapper. Okay, and then what it's doing, it's rendering out an item display box. So that's this box here. And it's passing into it the category and the subcategory. So if we go over into here, we've got, for each section, we've got our category, which we call assets or liabilities, and then our subcategory. So each subcategory is different. So it's cash assets or investment assets. So for your guys, it's going to be a little bit different. It'll be maybe category would be fixed costs and then variable costs, and then subcategory could be housing or transportation. So I'm not really sure what would be most intuitive. Or you could have transportation be the category and then fixed or variable be the subcategory. But I'll let you guys decide on that one. So into the net worth again. Then I have a thing called set item ID, which is a function that I need later on. So this display box I've got here, and it's doing its thing. But later on, I want to be able to click an item and have it bring up this edit form. But while I'm over here, I probably could set it to bring up the edit form, but I don't have it set to bring up the edit form. So I had to still pass the function in. So in this case, it's just passing in a function that returns null. But I probably should later, when I'm really going through this to flesh it out some more, make this editable so that you could click on it and then you could edit it. So then I've got the add form, which is right here. And then this is getting the category, the subcategory, and then the different labels for these sections here. Whoops. So if I go here, you've got different labels. So it's getting these labels, then it's getting the array for this, and then it has the same situation in that I'm passing in a dummy function just so that we don't crash anything if somebody clicks a button. So then we go down to what's actually being rendered. And we've got our page. So this page has the overall layout. It also has our page base styles, which sets it so that it's in the center like so, and then it's the same height and width as all the other pages. So if I went into dashboard, if I click into lifetime income stream, it has the same sizing because it also has the page base styles. So you need to make sure that it has the page base styles. So we've got our centering and everything like that. Then we build our unique grid template rows. So we've talked about that. And then, so this is the page. It starts when the count is 0. We want you to render the welcome page. So I'm just using ternary operator here. Also, I have to put in these curly braces because it's rendering JavaScript in this section. So if the count is 0, I want you to render welcome page. So when the count is 0, boom, we get this. Then I click this button and the count goes up to 1. So you can see down here in the buttons section, the count to the right, if it's less than 0, or so sorry, this is the left one. So if it's greater than 0, it's going to subtract it, else it's 0. So for this function, I wanted to make sure that they couldn't just click this a whole bunch of times. If they clicked it, blah, 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 then it would be like -40. So then they would have to click this one 40 times to get over. So instead, it just stops at 0 and then won't subtract anymore. So that's what this is doing. And then I should have the same setup over here, so that it has a stopper, so that, because right now, if we go over here, if I go blah, 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 then I have to go blah, 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 the same amount of counts to reduce it. So I should fix that so that it won't, so that it'll stop at the right number. So that is the page. Then if the count is less than 6, so it's saying if it's less than 6, it's going to render the add form. So then it's firing this function, which I built up here, and then it's checking the counts back and forth to render whichever box we're wanting. And I have this wrapped in these little JSX wrappers just so it doesn't give me an error, because it doesn't like it if you have divs that aren't contained in one div being rendered out. So finally, then if the count is above 6, we get to our final page. So this is the final page layout, which is also wrapped in these little JSX divs. So we've got our header, which is so right up here. So we're rendering out the header. Then we've got our charts. So our charts, the formatting for the charts is grid area B. So you can see here that we've got our grid area B, and then that is containing these two sections. Within the charts, we have our placement. So the chart sizing is set here according to what we wanted. So if I wanted the sunburst chart, let's see if I made it 90% and this one 10%, let's see what happens. So the charts are designed to be responsive to the div that they're in. So they're pulling their size from the screen, the window information. So that just kind of messes it all up, but it made this thing huge and this thing tiny. So we can control the sizing of the charts here. So that's our charts. So that's why we've got these placeholders for the charts, because the sunburst chart wants to just fill out whatever space it's in. So we control the space using its placeholder, which is the sunburst. Oop, I spelt that wrong. It's sunburst. I'm going to go change all occurrences. I hope that doesn't mess it up. Sunburst chart placeholder. And then we've got our projection chart placeholder. So those are our charts. Then we have our control panel. So then also, which I've shown you before, if I wanted to have it start at a different page, so if I wanted to start at the final page, I just set use state to 8, and then when I refresh, it'll bring me to count 8, which is the final page. So here, I want the control panel, which is this here, and then it's getting some specific details about the display and the count, which is going to be passing down. And that's what's telling it to render either of these. So the control panel knows which to render. So that's sort of the intro to the first page, which is networth.js. So hopefully if you have any questions, this kind of covers it, and we'll explain what's going on here.